The USPS delivers 160 billion pieces of mail a year, but somehow they still have time to deal with the most unhinged citizens in America. We're not talking about missing packages or broken boxes. We're talking about formal federal complaints filed by people who think their mailman is a vibe killer or a shadow trespasser. From aesthetic tantrums to delusional demands, these grievances are so petty they'll make you question human sanity. Get ready for 55 reasons why mail carriers deserve a massive raise. 1. Imagine being so obsessed with your lawn that the mail carrier is treated like a high-stakes trespasser. One Ohio homeowner filed a grievance claiming the mailman was aggressively walking, causing the Kentucky bluegrass to lose its emotional will to grow. The complainant actually demanded the USPS reimburse them for a specialized lawn therapist to talk to the turf. Do you think some people have way too much free time, or is a blade of grass truly worth a federal investigation? 2. We all know the rivalry between dogs and mailmen, but a Florida resident took it to a prehistoric level by complaining that the carrier was intimidating their pet iguana. According to the report, the carrier stared at the lizard for 3 seconds, causing the reptile to enter existential dread and refuse its daily kale. The owner insisted the carrier be rerouted because the iguana felt judged by the uniform. It's hard to tell who needs more help, the lizard or the person writing 3 pages about its hurt feelings. 3. Rain or snow won't stop the mail, but a slightly crooked envelope triggers a total meltdown for some. A woman in Illinois filed a complaint because her bill was placed in the box at a 45-degree angle instead of perfectly horizontal. She claimed this visual chaos ruined her afternoon and caused a migraine that prevented her from making dinner. She actually requested a written apology from the Postmaster General for the emotional distress caused by a slanted piece of junk mail. 4. There's a level of entitlement that comes with expecting your mail carrier to be a professional weather vane. A man in Arizona filed a formal complaint because his mail was too hot when he pulled it out during a 110-degree afternoon. He blamed the carrier for not keeping letters in a refrigerated compartment and demanded chilled delivery for his magazines so the pages wouldn't feel sweaty. If you were the mail carrier, would you even bother responding to someone who doesn't understand how the sun works? 5. Some see the mail carrier as a neighborhood hero. Others see a secret agent of the deep state. A resident in Oregon complained that their carrier was conspicuously ignoring their cat, which was sitting in the window waiting for a wave. The owner claimed this lack of acknowledgement was psychological warfare designed to lower the cat's self-esteem, and demanded the carrier be retrained in feline social etiquette. It is truly impressive how someone can turn a cat's boredom into a federal workplace conduct violation. 6. You'd think getting mail early is a blessing, but for one Georgia homeowner it was grounds for protest. They complained the carrier arrived at 10 in the morning instead of 2 in the afternoon, supposedly throwing off the rhythm of their golden retriever. The owner claimed the dog wasn't emotionally prepared for the mail slot noise that early and requested the carrier sit in the truck for 4 hours to maintain the status quo. Seriously, since when did the USPS start operating on a dog's nap schedule? 7. High fashion critiques aren't in the job description, but tell that to the California man who complained about his carrier's distracting sock choice. He claimed the neon green patterns were visible from his porch and were clashing horribly with the neighborhood's neutral palette, potentially lowering property values. He requested the post office implement a strictly monochromatic hosiery policy to prevent visual pollution. Is this the most first world problem you've ever heard? Or have you seen socks that could ruin a neighborhood? 8. Delivering a heavy package to the door is usually good service, but one Texan saw it as a calculated act of aggression. They filed a complaint because the carrier placed a box of heavy books directly in front of the door, forcing the homeowner to exercise their core muscles to push it inside. The complainant argued they didn't sign up for an unsolicited workout, and the carrier should have waited for them to come home to carry it inside. It takes a special kind of boldness to complain that your delivery was actually delivered too close. 9. Most ignore the scent of their mail, But a refined individual in Connecticut filed a grievance claiming their catalogs smelled like blue-collar sweat. They insisted the carrier use unscented hand sanitizer every 3 houses to ensure the aroma of the truck didn't contaminate their cooking magazines. The report even suggested the USPS invest in lavender-infused sorting facilities to improve the olfactory experience. You have to wonder if these people realize their mail has been touched by 50 different machines before reaching them. 10. A Nevada homeowner once filed a complaint because the mail truck was too white and reflected the desert sun into their breakfast nook at an uncomfortable angle. They demanded the USPS repaint that specific vehicle in matte charcoal to avoid disrupting their morning coffee experience. When the post office explained they don't custom paint trucks for individual sunlight preferences, the resident threatened to sue for unauthorized ocular harassment. 11. One homeowner in Wisconsin filed a grievance because the carrier's uniform clashed with the seasonal vibe of their porch decorations. During October, the resident insisted the carrier be required to wear a pumpkin-themed hat to ensure they didn't ruin the spooky aesthetic of the neighborhood. They even argued that the standard blue uniform was a visual pollutant that lowered the quality of their autumn-themed Instagram photos. Do you think public servants should be forced to dress as seasonal mascots just to please your followers? 12. Most people appreciate a friendly greeting, but one man in New Jersey complained that his mail carrier's smile was suspiciously enthusiastic for a Monday morning. He argued that nobody should be that happy delivering utility bills and accused the carrier of being on some kind of toxic positivity crusade designed to make the neighbors feel inadequate about their own lives. He requested a carrier with a more neutral, professional grimace to better match the somber reality of the modern economy. It's truly peak suburban drama when a smile is treated like a federal offense. 13. A woman in Seattle filed a complaint because the rubber band around her stack of mail was the wrong shade of tan, claiming it clashed with her porch's mahogany stain. She insisted that the USPS should provide a color wheel for residents to select their preferred fastener hues for each season. When the post office ignored her request, she sent a follow-up letter claiming the clashing beige was a form of visual assault that lowered her mood for the entire weekend. What kind of person has a life so perfect that the color of a rubber band is their biggest crisis? 14. In a bizarre display of laziness, a homeowner in Virginia complained that the mail carrier didn't pre-open their envelopes to save them the effort of finding a letter opener. They argued that since the carrier is already handling the mail, it's only logical they should provide an executive unboxing service for premium taxpayers. The complainant was genuinely offended that the USPS expected them to do the manual labor of tearing paper in their own home. Should the Postal Service start offering a lazy person tier of delivery, or is this just pure madness? 15. An Arizona resident filed a report claiming the carrier was deliberately ignoring their attempt to start a political debate at the curb. They argued that because the carrier is a government employee, they are a captive audience for any taxpayer who wants to complain about the economy for 45 minutes. When the carrier kept moving to finish the route, the resident filed a denial of free speech report with the local postmaster. At what point does a mailbox stop being a delivery point and start being a target for people who just need a therapist? 16. We've all seen beware of dog signs, but one carrier in Ohio was reported for intimidating a ceramic garden gnome. The owner claimed the carrier placed a package too close to the gnome, which supposedly disturbed the spiritual energy of the garden's protector. The complaint demanded a written apology to the gnome and a promise that all future deliveries be placed at least 5 feet away from any lawn ornaments. It's a bold move to ask a federal employee to show more respect to a plastic statue than to the person living inside the house. 17. A homeowner in North Carolina filed a formal complaint because their mail carrier refused to act as a decoy during a neighborhood game of hide-and-seek. The resident claimed that since the carrier was already on the property, they should have stood in the driveway to distract the it player while the homeowner hid behind a bush. When the carrier kept walking to finish their route, the resident labeled it a failure of community integration and demanded a carrier with a more playful and cooperative spirit. Imagine being so committed to a backyard game that you try to draft a federal employee into your tactical maneuvers. 18. One homeowner in Colorado complained that their mail carrier was walking too efficiently, which made the homeowner feel rushed and unproductive while watching from the window. They requested the carrier slow down their pace to a gentle stroll, so the neighborhood wouldn't feel like a high-stress workplace during delivery hours. The resident actually suggested the carrier should stop and admire the flowers every few houses to create a more harmonious vibe for the street. 19. A woman in Tennessee filed a complaint because her mail carrier didn't properly acknowledge her new haircut while she was standing in the garage. She claimed the carrier's lack of a compliment was a calculated blow to her self-esteem and suggested the USPS should include basic social validation in their training manuals. She even went as far as to say that her tax dollars pay for the carrier's salary, so a nice layers Susan was the bare minimum she deserved. 20. A homeowner in South Carolina filed a formal grievance because their mail carrier was walking with too much rhythmic confidence on the sidewalk. The resident claimed that the carrier's brisk professional pace felt like a non-verbal critique of their own sedentary lifestyle and demanded the USPS assign a carrier who stumbles or looks tired to match the neighborhood's relaxed energy. It's a staggering level of insecurity when a stranger's healthy walking habit is interpreted as a personal insult to your choice of couch. 21. Imagine the audacity of a Kentucky resident who filed a federal grievance because their mail carrier's shadow was trespassing on their petunias. The homeowner claimed the silhouette blocked the sun for exactly 4 seconds, supposedly stunting the flower's emotional growth and causing a gloomy disposition. They demanded the USPS reroute the entire neighborhood's schedule to ensure no shadows ever touch their garden during peak photosynthesis hours. It takes a truly delusional level of entitlement to try and sue a government employee for the natural movement of the sun. 22. A woman in Arizona filed a formal grievance because her carrier didn't properly introduce the mail to her mailbox before sliding it inside. She insisted the abrupt insertion of a phone bill was a violation of the mailbox's personal space, and that the carrier should speak soothing words to the slot to ensure a smooth transition. She even suggested the mailbox had developed operational trauma and demanded a specialized repairman to assess its emotional state. 23. One woman in Rhode Island filed a complaint because the blue shade of the mail truck was clashing violently with her newly painted teal shutters. She insisted the visual friction gave her a chromatic headache and requested the USPS repaint that specific vehicle to eggshell white. The report even suggested the carrier was flaunting the mismatched colors just to ruin her curb appeal and lower her property value. 24. In a bizarre display of territoriality, a resident in Colorado complained that the mail carrier was stealing the prestige of their driveway by letting a single drop of truck oil fall on the pavement. They argued that the industrial contamination ruined the pristine, high-end feel of their cul-de-sac and demanded a professional forensic cleaning crew be dispatched at the government's expense. The homeowner even requested a purity certificate to prove their concrete was once again safe for their designer shoes. It's a special kind of ego to believe a tiny oil spot is a direct assault on your social status. 25. High-stakes drama unfolded in Nevada when a man reported his carrier for stealing the silence of his driveway with boots that made a crunchy sound on the gravel. He argued the USPS should switch to felt-soled slippers or hover technology to ensure his morning meditation wasn't interrupted by the reality of a physical person. The complainant actually asked for a quietude rebate on his taxes to compensate for the 3 seconds of noise pollution he endured. 26. A Georgia woman filed an official report claiming her mail carrier was conspicuously avoiding her lawn gnome's gaze, interpreting it as deep-seated disrespect toward her garden's spiritual guardians. She insisted the carrier be retrained to offer a brief nod or a respectful tip of the hat to all outdoor statuary to ensure a harmonious delivery. The complaint even included a vibe assessment, claiming the gnome felt emotionally depleted after being ignored. Seriously, how many hours of therapy do you think this woman actually needs? 27. A California woman submitted an official report because her carrier refused to take a selfie for a neighborhood safety app. She insisted that as a public servant, the carrier should be cataloged and identified by every resident to ensure total transparency. When the carrier cited privacy and a tight schedule, she labeled it a security threat and accused the worker of having shifty, un-American motives. Some people won't be happy until they have every government employee on a digital leash for their own entertainment. 28. One homeowner in Oregon filed a complaint because the mail carrier failed to appreciate the intricate pattern of the spiderwebs on the front porch. The resident, a self-appointed arachnid architect, claimed the carrier's quick delivery showed a total lack of cultural awareness for the natural arts. They requested the USPS send a different carrier who possessed a deeper connection to nature and would photograph the webs instead of just doing their job. 29. A customer in Michigan was outraged, stating in a grievance that the mail truck was uncomfortably clean, which made their own dirty SUV look bad by comparison. They claimed the shimmering white paint was an act of passive-aggressive cleanliness intended to shame the rest of the street into washing their cars. The resident demanded the post office intentionally spray mud on the vehicle before it entered their zip code to maintain a relatable blue-collar aesthetic. It takes a unique mind to be offended by a well-maintained government vehicle. 30. A woman in Nevada submitted an official report because her mail carrier refused to use a personalized greeting that she had printed on a sign next to the bell. The sign instructed all visitors to address her as the Grand Duchess of the Cul-de-sac, and she labeled the carrier's standard "Good morning" as an act of treason and disrespect. She requested a new carrier who was more comfortable with royal protocol and willing to acknowledge her self-appointed title. Some people won't be happy until they have the entire federal government bowing to their backyard hierarchy. 31. A homeowner in Alabama filed a federal grievance because their mail carrier didn't use a ceremonial voice when announcing a package delivery. The resident claimed that receiving a box of artisanal pickles required a level of gravitas that a casual "have a nice day" simply lacked. They requested the USPS implement mandatory theatrical training so luxury goods are announced with the booming resonance of a Shakespearean actor. It takes a legendary level of narcissism to expect a government employee to audition for a play just to hand you a jar of cucumbers. 32. In a bizarre display of territoriality, a New Hampshire man reported his carrier for illegally admiring his collection of antique weather vanes. The complainant argued the carrier's lingering gaze was a form of visual theft, and that the aesthetic beauty of his roof ornaments was private property not meant for public consumption. He demanded the carrier wear specialized vision-restricting goggles to ensure they only saw the mailbox and nothing else on the property. What do you think goes through someone's head when they decide to sue a person for the crime of having eyes? 33. A woman in Missouri submitted a complaint because the rubber band used to bundle her coupons was too tight, claiming it was a subtle hint from the government that she needed to go on a diet. She insisted the tension of the elastic was a form of passive-aggressive body shaming and demanded a written apology from the Postmaster General for the emotional distress. She even suggested all carriers be retrained in fat-positive packaging techniques to avoid triggering residents with high-tension rubber. 34. Delivering a heavy catalog is part of the job, but one Maine resident saw it as a premeditated attack on their physical stamina. They filed a report because the carrier placed a thick magazine on the porch, forcing the homeowner to bend down and risk a spinal misalignment to retrieve it. The complaint suggested the USPS provide a hydraulic lift for every doorstep or have the carrier read the magazine aloud through the window to avoid manual labor. If you're so fragile that a magazine is a health hazard, Is the mail really your biggest problem? 35. Delivering a heavy box is a standard task, but a guy in Texas saw it as an unauthorized workout invitation. He filed a complaint because the carrier placed a package of dumbbells on the porch, forcing him to accidentally exercise while moving them inside. He argued the carrier should have used a forklift or waited for him to hire a professional mover to avoid unsolicited physical exertion on his day off. 36. A resident in Pennsylvania filed a formal grievance because their mail carrier was breathing too loudly while walking up the driveway. The homeowner claimed the audible respiration was a deliberate attempt to disturb the zen-like silence of their morning meditation and demanded the carrier be issued a silencer or be forced to hold their breath until the mail was safely in the box. The report actually specified that the carrier sounded like a congested freight train, which allegedly caused the homeowner's crystals to vibrate out of alignment. Do you think people who complain about the sound of breathing should be required to live in a soundproof bunker? 37. A customer in Kentucky filed an official report because the mail carrier failed to offer a weather forecast during a brief interaction. The resident claimed that since the USPS motto mentions rain or shine, carriers are legally obligated to act as local meteorologists for the community. They demanded the carrier provide a 5-day outlook and a detailed humidity report before being allowed to hand over any envelopes. It's hard to imagine being so lonely that you try to turn your mailman into a walking weather channel. 38. A resident in North Carolina complained that their mail was too organized, which made them feel pressured to be more productive. They argued that perfectly stacked envelopes were a form of organizational bullying and requested the carrier shuffle and scatter the mail inside the box to reflect a realistic, messy lifestyle. The complainant actually suggested the carrier's efficiency was a personal insult to their own lack of tidiness. 39. A Tennessee man reached a new peak of laziness when he reported his carrier for maliciously placing an envelope at the bottom of the mailbox instead of leaning it against the side. He argued that the extra 2 inches he had to reach caused a microscopic strain in his wrist, labeling it a workplace injury despite being unemployed. He demanded the post office provide a specialized reach assistance tool or have the carrier hand-deliver junk mail directly to his bedside. At what point does a mailbox become too much responsibility for a functioning adult? 40. Most people just want their mail, but a man in Georgia reported his carrier for maliciously delivering a postcard that depicted a tropical beach while it was raining outside. He argued that the carrier should have checked the weather forecast and withheld any aspirational travel imagery that might cause seasonal depression on a gray day. The complainant seriously requested that the USPS implement a mood-sensitive sorting process to ensure that the visual content of the mail matches the current barometric pressure. At what point does a postcard become a targeted psychological attack on your afternoon? 41. A homeowner in Ohio filed a formal grievance because their mail carrier was using their driveway as a personal catwalk. The complainant claimed the carrier's natural stride was excessively confident, which they interpreted as a silent mockery of their own mobility issues. They demanded the USPS assign a carrier with a more humble shuffled gait to ensure the resident didn't feel emotionally intimidated during the morning delivery. It's truly a new level of insecurity when someone views a professional walking pace as a targeted psychological attack on their self-esteem. 42. Most people appreciate a dry package, but one man in Washington state complained that his mail carrier was excessively shaking their umbrella near his porch. He argued that the droplets were intentionally aimed at his decorative welcome mat, causing it to become damp and visually unappealing for guests. He requested a written apology and a reimbursement for a high-speed industrial dryer to restore the mat's fluffy texture after every rainy delivery. 43. A woman in Florida submitted a formal report because her mail carrier refused to provide a signature on her personal guestbook. She insisted that since the carrier visits her property daily, they are technically a recurring social guest and should document their presence for her family archives. When the carrier explained they were on a strict schedule, she labeled it a cold, bureaucratic rejection that ruined the hospitality of her household. 44. In a bizarre display of micromanagement, a resident in Virginia complained that the rubber bands on their mail were tensioned to an aggressive degree. They claimed that snapping the band caused a traumatic auditory event that startled their parakeet and demanded the USPS switch to low-impact, silk-threaded ties. The complainant actually suggested that the carrier was intentionally overstretching the rubber to create a hostile unboxing experience for the family. It's impressive how some people can turn a piece of office stationery into a weapon of psychological warfare. 45. A man in Arizona filed a grievance because his mail was uncomfortably crisp, claiming the lack of wrinkles made it feel unauthentic and mass-produced. He argued that a real public servant should weather the mail slightly to give it a more rustic, traveled feel that matched his home's farmhouse aesthetic. He requested the carrier manually crinkle his magazines before delivery to ensure they looked lived in on his coffee table. 46. One homeowner in Illinois filed a report because the mail carrier failed to acknowledge their new gravel driveway with an appropriate expression of awe. The resident claimed they stood by the window to watch the carrier's reaction, and the stony indifference on the worker's face was a direct insult to their home improvement efforts. They demanded the carrier be retrained to provide a thumbs up or a verbal compliment for any property upgrades exceeding $500 in value. It takes a special kind of ego to expect a federal employee to act as a full-time hype man for your landscaping. 47. A woman in California was outraged when she discovered her mail carrier was not matching the speed of the neighborhood. She filed a complaint stating that everyone else on the street drives high-end electric vehicles, and the clunky internal combustion sound of the mail truck was lowering the local vibration. She demanded the USPS either switch to a silent fleet for her specific zip code or have the carrier coast silently with the engine off while passing her house. Imagine being so elitist that the literal sound of the public service you rely on is considered a form of noise pollution. 48. A resident in Maryland complained that their mail carrier was wearing a hat at a non-standard angle, which they claimed was a secret signal to local burglars. The homeowner insisted that the slight tilt of the brim was a coded message indicating which houses had the best electronics and demanded a full FBI investigation into the carrier's headwear choices. They even suggested the USPS implement a level ruler check before every shift to ensure all hats were perfectly horizontal. At what point does neighborhood watch cross the line into full-blown clinical paranoia? 49. An Illinois woman reached a new peak of entitlement when she reported her carrier for excessive eye contact while handing over a letter. She claimed the gaze was judgmental and invasive, as if the carrier were secretly calculating her credit score based on the return address. She requested the USPS issue tinted visors so residents wouldn't have to endure the unsolicited intimacy of being looked at during a transaction. It takes a special kind of ego to think the mailman is analyzing your life in the 3 seconds it takes to hand you mail. 50. One man in Oregon reported his carrier for stealing the scent of his jasmine bushes by walking past them too slowly. He claimed the carrier was inhaling deeply and essentially shoplifting the floral aroma that he paid his gardener to maintain. He demanded a fragrance tax be deducted from his annual postal fees to compensate for the lost molecules of scent taken by the carrier's lungs. Seriously, when did the air around your house become private property that you can charge the government for breathing? 51. A resident in Arizona filed a report claiming the mail carrier was stealing the shade from their driveway by parking the truck under a tree for 30 seconds. They argued that the truck was absorbing the cool air that belonged to their property and demanded a cooling credit on their next tax return to compensate for the lost shade. The post office had to explain that the shade is not private property, but the resident still insisted it was a form of environmental theft. 52. Most people just want their packages, but a man in Connecticut filed a complaint because his carrier didn't properly acknowledge his new high-definition doorbell camera. He argued that since the carrier is a government representative, they should waive and offer a brief verbal report to the lens every day to ensure the audio-visual sync was working for his security logs. He labeled the carrier's silent delivery as bureaucratic coldness and demanded a written apology for the lack of digital engagement. Some people truly believe the entire world is a stage, and the mailman is just an underpaid extra in their personal movie. 53. A woman in Illinois reached a new peak of pettiness when she reported her carrier for maliciously folding a glossy fashion magazine that specifically said, "Do not bend," on the cover. The twist? She admitted the magazine was addressed to her neighbor, but she was offended on their behalf because the sight of a creased cover ruined the aesthetic of the communal mailroom. She requested a federal investigation into the carrier's disregard for paper integrity and suggested they be banned from handling high-fashion publications. Imagine having a life so devoid of conflict that you start policing the structural integrity of other people's junk mail. 54. Most people just want their packages, but a Connecticut man reported his carrier for maliciously placing a box in a way that blocked his flower pot from his doorbell camera. He argued the carrier was sabotaging his security by creating a blind spot for the 30 minutes until he got home. The complainant demanded a $500 credit for the emotional trauma of not seeing his ceramic petunias in 4K resolution while at work. 55. A man in Arizona filed an official report because the mail carrier's shadow was trespassing on his front porch during his afternoon nap. He claimed the carrier's silhouette passing over his window was a visual intrusion of privacy and demanded the USPS reroute the entire delivery schedule to 3 a.m. to avoid any interaction with the sun. He actually requested a sunlight restoration fee for the 3 seconds of shade he was forced to endure against his will. Do you think the Postal Service should start issuing restraining orders against residents who try to sue the literal movement of the earth? There you have it. 55 instances of absolute postal pandemonium. It's a miracle these workers show up every day knowing they're one clashing uniform, away from a federal investigation by a bored neighbor. Which of these legendary customers made you want to apologize to your own mailman immediately? Drop your most insane neighbor stories in the comments below. The more absurd, the better. Smash that like button, subscribe for more dives into human entitlement, and we'll see you in the next one.